"Sir, you need to move." The female voice cut sharply through the luxury of the first-class cabin, as sharp as a blade slicing the air. Every passenger lifted their head. In an instant, the quiet space transformed into a stage, all eyes fixed on a black man sitting silently in seat 1A. That man was Derek Lawson, 48 years old, dressed in a finely tailored suit, polished Italian leather shoes, a folded Wall Street Journal resting on his lap. At his age, he exuded the calm confidence of someone long familiar with power. But to flight attendant Caroline Miller, only 32, he looked like something else, an intruder in the world of those deemed worthy. "This seat," Caroline declared, her voice pitched high so the entire cabin could hear, "is reserved for a true premium passenger, not for, well, you understand, don't you?" Her finger pointed directly at Derek, the gesture as cold as a verdict. Behind her stood a white man with arms crossed. Gregory Shaw, 45, a platinum business traveler, his face showing irritation. "Finally, someone with common sense. I knew there was a mistake." He smirked, as if reclaiming a throne that had been stolen. Derek remained silent. His jaw tightened slightly, a detail barely noticeable unless one paid close attention. Outside the window, the midday sun struck the metal wing, sending a blinding reflection. Inside, several passengers raised their phones to record. Like flowers turning to the sun, their cameras all pointed toward this moment, instinctively aware a story was unfolding. Caroline stepped closer, blocking the aisle, turning Derek into the center of a circle. "I need to see your boarding pass and the credit card used to purchase this ticket. First class requires transaction verification." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to obedience. Gregory nodded, the metal of his platinum badge gleaming under the cabin lights. "I fly this route twice a month. Never seen such chaos. Unbelievable." Beneath his words was an accusation. "Men like you do not belong here." Derek slowly pulled out his ticket, crisp and perfectly intact. "First class, seat 1A, purchased 3 weeks ago." He handed it to Caroline without a word. She snatched it, holding it up to the light as if it were counterfeit. "This could be fraud. We've seen passengers use fake documents." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. From seat 2B, a young woman's voice rang out, trembling yet fierce. Jasmine Brooks, 28, held up her phone. "Excuse me, this is insane. I'm live streaming." On her screen, the words appeared, "First-class discrimination, airline racism, happening now." The viewer count leapt, 23, 67, 156. Caroline snapped, "Put that phone away, miss. This is an internal matter." Jasmine shot back, eyes burning with defiance. "No, this is racism. I'm recording everything." Gregory interrupted again, his tone urgent but theatrical. "I have a $400 million meeting in Seattle this afternoon. We need this resolved now. As a platinum member, I should be prioritized." He pressed the word priority as if it were law. Derek remained silent, but his leather briefcase revealed a debossed logo, Lawson Capital Group. On the open newspaper, a headline blared, "Sky High Airlines Merger Vote. Today, 2:00 p.m. His phone buzzed, a notification flashing. Board members arriving for emergency vote. Caroline clutched the ticket tighter, raising her voice so the audience would not miss it. "I'm still waiting for credit card verification. This is security protocol." From row 3A, an older woman whispered to her husband, "This doesn't make sense." Yet she quickly turned away, avoiding Derek's eyes. He lifted his head, his voice low, calm but sharp as a blade. "So tell me, what about my appearance raises a security concern?" The question froze Caroline, her prepared script suddenly useless. She stammered, "That's not what I meant. What I mean is, we have procedures." "Procedures that apply only to me?" Derek's tone remained soft, but each word landed like iron. "Did you ask other passengers for their credit cards?" Gregory rushed in, grasping at control. "This has nothing to do with race. It's just seating policy." Derek turned to him, his eyes cold. "When was the last time you were asked to show your credit card?" Gregory faltered. I'm platinum. The airline knows me." "They know you because you are platinum, or because you are white?" The question detonated in the cabin, leaving a deadly silence. Gregory's mouth opened, no words emerging. The live stream viewer count soared past 1,200. Comments flooded. "Sue them! Name and shame! This is racism, Liv." Caroline's composure cracked as she realized the situation was spiraling out of her control. "All you need to do is cooperate. I can rebook you on the next flight, first class as well." Derek raised an eyebrow, his smile thin and cold. "Rebook me on the very seat I already purchased? How generous." From the overhead speakers, the ground staff's voice echoed. "Flight 892 to Seattle will depart in 30 minutes. Please settle into your seats." Gregory clenched his jaw. "For God's sake, get him out of that seat. I'm about to lose a deal." Caroline nodded, lowering her voice but still loud enough for all to hear. "If you do not leave voluntarily, I will have to call security." Derek lifted his gaze, fixing on her name tag, Caroline Miller. A faint smile crossed his lips, filled with meaning. "Call security," he repeated slowly, savoring each word. For a passenger sitting quietly, reading a newspaper in the very seat he purchased. The entire cabin held its breath. Beneath his calm surface, a storm of power was rising. Caroline kept her voice cold, but the way her hand clenched the ticket betrayed her unease. In her mind, every training scenario had been rehearsed, except this one. "You are disturbing the order of the cabin," she raised her voice, trying to regain control. "If you fail to comply with crew instructions, we are required to act under Federal Aviation Regulations, Section 121.580. Her words echoed like a formal indictment. Yet Derek remained still, his newspaper neatly folded. His voice was calm, but laced with steel. Regulation 121.580 concerns passengers refusing to follow reasonable and safe instructions. Tell me, which of your instructions has anything to do with the safety of this flight?" The first-class cabin went silent. Gregory stood behind him, frowning, anger mixed with unease. "Don't twist the law on them. Just move him already." Jasmine, her camera trembling in her hand, though her eyes blazed with fury, whispered into her live stream, "He knows the law. Ooh, he's flipping the script." The viewer count jumped from 1,200 to 2,000 in seconds. Comments exploded. "He's a lawyer. Destroy them. Caroline swallowed hard. She clung to her authority. I still need the credit card used for verification. This is mandatory procedure. Derek tilted his head slightly, a faint smile crossing his lips. Mandatory procedure. Then show me one other passenger in this cabin who has been asked the same. Mr. Gregory, for example. Did you hand over your credit card? Gregory jerked his head up, caught off guard. I'm Platinum. They know me. Do they know you because of your frequent flyer record, or because of the color of your skin? Derek's words were soft as air, yet struck like a blow to Gregory's face. Gregory was left speechless, his eyes darting away. The live stream caught it all. Comments poured in. Busted. Systemic racism caught Liv. From row 3A, the elderly woman whispered again, this time loud enough for a few to hear. He's right. This is clearly unfair. But like most, she only observed, taking no action. Caroline could feel herself losing the room. She raised her voice, performing as if on stage. You are obstructing operational procedures. If you do not cooperate, I will call security immediately. The threat hung in the air, like a shadow. Some passengers shivered, knowing how quickly tension could turn violent once police were involved on a plane. Derek calmly folded his newspaper and placed it in his briefcase. He looked up at Caroline, his voice deep, steady, yet edged with iron. You can call them, but remember this, every word you say, every move you make, is being recorded. Evidence is building with every second, and I assure you, I will not be the one forced to explain myself in court. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Gregory, once confident, was beginning to unravel. He hissed through clenched teeth. We are late already. Get him off this plane now. Derek's phone buzzed again. The notification glowed. Sky-high merger documents, awaiting approval. The light from the screen illuminated his face, making him look like a man holding power over life and death itself. Jasmine whispered into her live stream, her voice filled with excitement. He's not just a regular passenger. Something bigger is happening. The viewer count surged to 3,000. Comments flooded in. He's somebody powerful. This is bigger than a seat. Caroline could feel control slipping away, yet her pride pushed her forward. If you refuse to leave, I will call the flight manager. And when that happens, things will get far more serious. Derek rose to his feet, not rushed, not angry, every motion precise, radiating complete control. He towered over Caroline, his shadow cast across her under the cabin lights. Miss Caroline, he said her name, his voice lowered but clear. The only person making this situation more serious is you. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes locked on them. Gregory inhaled sharply, stepping back half a pace. Jasmine gripped her phone tighter, her heart pounding. For a brief moment, Derek leaned closer, his voice just enough for Caroline alone. You have no idea what kind of power you are waking. Then he straightened, his gaze shifting to the cabin door, where the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The flight manager was on his way. The sound of heels struck down the aisle, firm and resonant, like the beat of a war drum. Every passenger turned their head. Entering was Linda Harper, 52, a veteran flight manager, petite in frame, but walking with the authority of 2 decades of experience. "What exactly is going on here?" Linda asked, her steady voice slicing through the thick air. Her eyes swept quickly, catching the phone's live streaming, the tense faces, and Caroline standing frozen like a defendant awaiting judgment. Caroline rushed into explanation, words tumbling out. "The man in seat 1A has refused to verify his ticket, refused to cooperate, and is obstructing. I am required to follow procedure." Linda folded her arms, her gaze pinning Carolyn. "Refused to cooperate in what way?" Carolyn faltered. The story sounded convincing when exaggerated, but under that penetrating stare, every word felt hollow. Gregory seized the moment to interject, his tone dripping with entitlement. "I am a platinum member. I'm a platinum. This is clearly a mistake. That man is in my seat. The airline needs to correct this immediately. I pay for priority, not for delays." From seat 2B came the clatter of typing. Jasmine was still live streaming, her camera fixed on Linda, capturing every detail. The numbers on her screen climbed higher. 2,800, 3,200, comments flooding in. She better handle this right? Management cover-up incoming. Linda turned to Derek. "Sir, I'm the flight manager. I need to understand the situation. Is there a problem with your ticket?" Derek opened his briefcase and presented the ticket once more, his movements deliberate, as if to let everyone see. "Seat 1A. First class. Purchased 3 weeks ago. There is no system error. Only human error." The last words landed like a hammer blow. A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. Linda kept her face neutral, though her eyes flickered. The gold watch on her wrist caught the cabin light, a reminder that every minute lost meant massive financial costs. "I understand, sir. But with platinum members, the airline does have discretion to prioritize in certain special circumstances." Derek tilted his head, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "There are no special circumstances here. Only a flight attendant and a passenger trying to turn skin color into a clause of the carriage contract." The cabin froze. One heartbeat of silence. Jasmine whispered into her live stream. "He just said it outright. This isn't misunderstanding anymore. This is racism." The viewer count shot to 4,500. Gregory's face flushed red, his neck veins straining. "Don't make this about race. This is about airline policy. We have the right." "The right to what?" Derek cut in, his tone steely. "The right to rewrite the contract between passenger and airline here in the cabin? Or the right to redefine the term legitimate customer based on skin color?" The counterattack was so sharp that Gregory's jaw dropped, words failing him. A few passengers muttered, "He's right. We never have to show credit cards in first class." Linda could feel the balance shifting. She gripped her work iPad tighter, but sweat dotted her forehead. In her earpiece, the ground team's voice pressed urgently. "We need a report now. Sky-high stock is fluctuating on rumors. Time is running out." Derek's eyes locked onto Linda, unwavering. "You are the manager, correct? Then manage. Because if you continue covering up this blatant violation, you will not just lose one passenger, you will lose far more." Linda tried to maintain her composure, but her heartbeat raced. Derek's words did not sound like an empty threat, but a warning from someone who held real power. Gregory shouted one last time, desperate. "This is ridiculous. I have a $20 million deal waiting. The entire plane should not revolve around someone unfit to be here. Derek turned his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. 20 million, he repeated, his tone calm, as if remarking on the price of an apartment. That amount isn't enough to make me frown. I close deals 25 times that size before breakfast. The words fell like a sledgehammer. Gregory staggered back, stunned. Passengers gasped in unison. The live stream erupted. 6,000 viewers, comments flooding. He's a shark! This man runs the room. At that moment, 2 uniformed officers appeared at the cabin door. Officer Daniels and Officer Ruiz, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the room. The tension instantly shifted from confrontation to danger. Linda drew a deep breath. Finally, they're here. But she did not realize this moment was the line where a small service dispute turned into a full-scale corporate crisis. Derek glanced at Caroline, then Linda, then the officers. His voice dropped, steady and commanding. You arrived just in time. We are going to document this together. Every word, every action. Because this moment will not disappear. The cabin seemed to choke on silence. Phones held high. The blue glow of screens illuminated the faces of those about to be exposed, and a single realization spread like fire. This man was no ordinary passenger. Officers Daniels and Ruiz stepped inside, their heavy footsteps weighing down the first-class cabin, as if the air itself had thickened. The whispers died away. Every gaze shifted toward them, and at the center sat Derek, his back straight, the cabin lights glinting off his silver frames, making him appear both calm and enigmatic. We received a report of a disruptive passenger, Officer Daniels announced firmly, almost presuming Derek to be the culprit. Caroline leapt at the chance. Yes, it's him. He refused to comply, refused to provide the required documents, and argued with the crew. Completely uncooperative. Daniels nodded, his hand hovering near his baton. Yet Derek did not stir. He slowly lifted his head, his voice deep and steady, like an underground current. Before you write a single line in your report, hear me out. I was sitting in the seat I purchased, reading a newspaper. The crew demanded I provide additional documents not asked of any other passenger, and the reason? Let me guess, my appearance was inconvenient. Silence gripped the cabin. His words drew a sharp line, forcing everyone to consider which side they stood on. Gregory broke in, impatient. Don't turn this into race. This is simply a matter of seating policy. Derek turned his head, his eyes gleaming with a strange fire. Then present that policy. Write it. Put it in black and white. If not, everything you have done is nothing but arbitrary and biased. The live stream captured it all. Viewers surged. 7,500, 8,200. Comments flooding in. Show the policy. He's dismantling them with law. Officer Ruiz, the younger of the two, hesitated, glancing uneasily at Daniels. The certainty they had walked in with was cracking. Derek pressed on, his tone now like a lawyer in court. Do you know that under Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, any denial of service based on discrimination is a federal violation, and under 49 U.S. Code, POWS or 40127, airlines are prohibited from discriminating against passengers based on race, color, or nationality. The air thickened. Linda frowned, Realizing this was no longer a simple matter of control, Caroline clung to her authority. "You are obstructing flight operations," Derek cut her off, his voice cold as steel. "The flight is obstructed not by me, but by the discrimination coming from your own staff." A wave of murmurs rippled. The elderly woman in seat 3A, silent until now, whispered to her husband, "He's right. This isn't the first time I've seen this happen." Jasmine clutched her phone tighter, her heart pounding, and whispered into her live stream, "He just cited federal law. This isn't a seat dispute anymore. This is a potential lawsuit." The viewer count spiked past 10,000. Gregory began to unravel, pointing a trembling finger at Derek and shouting, "Enough! Get him off this plane! I have a $20 million meeting, and I won't let someone like him ruin it." Derek turned, a faint smile curling at the edge of his mouth. $20 million. As I said before, that's a fraction of the deals I close every day. Do you know what is truly priceless? The moment people stop measuring human worth by skin color. The cabin erupted in silence, a silence so heavy it pressed down on every chest. Gregory stepped back, face flushed crimson. At that moment, Derek's phone buzzed. He lifted it, the screen lighting up. Sky-high merger. Urgent board vote. 30 minutes remaining. He silenced the alert, his eyes moving slowly across Caroline, Linda, the two officers, and finally lingering longest on Gregory. "You think you are controlling the situation," Derek said as he rose deliberately to his feet, his voice echoing across the cabin. "In truth, every decision made here today will extend far beyond this flight. It will set a precedent." Caroline's voice shook. "Are you threatening the airline?" Derek bent down, softly closing his leather briefcase. The click of the lock sounded like the end of a sentence. "No, Caroline. I am reminding you that every company has a balance sheet. And sometimes the greatest loss is not from technical failure, but from losing something called dignity." A chill swept through Linda. His words did not sound like the outrage of an angry passenger, but the warning of an investor, someone capable of altering the fate of a company with a single command. Gregory opened his mouth to retort, but just then, the piercing crackle of a radio erupted from Daniel's belt. "Control to Daniels. Corporate is calling. Highest priority." The entire cabin froze. Corporate? At this moment? Daniels lifted the radio, his expression unsettled. Linda's brow furrowed deeply. Caroline's face drained of color. Derek leaned back into his seat, his hands calmly folded. His voice was low, but Jasmine's microphone caught it clearly. "The real game has only just begun." The static from the radio faded, and the cabin sank into heavy silence. Daniels pressed a hand to his earpiece, his expression shifting. They said this is being handled at the highest level. We have to wait for orders." Linda froze. The highest level? What began as a simple seating dispute had now reached the top of the company. Caroline's hands trembled as she clutched her notebook like a lifeline. Gregory, dressed in an expensive suit, suddenly faltered, his polished shoes seeming unable to hold him steady. Derek, meanwhile, calmly set his leather briefcase on the tray table of seat 1A and snapped it open. The sharp click echoed like the unlocking of a vault. He pulled out a thick stack of documents, crisp and marked with the seal of Washington Equity Partners. Legal codes and multi-million-dollar figures glinted under the cabin lights. Gregory squinted, trying to steady himself. "Don't wave those papers around. They don't change the fact you took my seat." Derek lifted his gaze, eyes cold. "These are not just papers. This is the merger agreement for Sky High Airlines, valued at $500 million. And I, Gregory, am the man with the power to say yes or no to its survival." The cabin erupted. Passengers gasped. Jasmine's live stream phone buzzed with thousands of comments pouring in each minute. "What? He owns the airline. $500 million merger deal. This is history unfolding." Linda blurted. You're involved with the Sky High deal." Derek closed the Wall Street Journal and laid it neatly atop the file. On the front page, a bold headline read, "Sky High Airlines awaits merger vote, 2:00 p.m. Deadline." He spoke slowly, each word falling like a hammer. "Not involved. I am the decision maker." Caroline went pale, her heart racing. Every command she had barked minutes ago now twisted into blades aimed at her own career. Daniels and Ruiz exchanged a glance and quietly moved their hands away from their belts, their demeanor shifting instantly. Gregory gave a weak, crooked laugh. "You're joking, right? No one would risk $500 million over a seat." Derek narrowed his eyes, his voice dropping, edged with steel. "That is not a threat. That is market power. You said you had a $20 million contract. With one phone call, I can erase $756 million in market value from this airline. Shall we test it?" Gregory stood frozen, a bead of sweat trailing down his temple. Derek's phone buzzed again. He answered, putting it on speaker. A deep, urgent voice filled the cabin. "Mr. Washington, this is Robert Hale, CEO of Sky High. We've been informed of an incident. Can we speak?" The entire cabin went silent. The CEO of the airline himself was calling this plane. Linda held her breath. Caroline looked faint. Derek responded curtly. "Robert, perfect timing. Your entire board can hear me right now, through dozens of live streams. So listen carefully. Your staff just showed the world why my investment in Sky High is no longer safe." On the other end, Robert's voice rushed. "Mr. Washington, please stay calm. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We will handle it internally." "It is no longer internal," Derek cut him off, his tone sharp as iron. "This is racial discrimination with witnesses, video evidence, and over 10,000 live stream viewers. How will you handle that?" Heavy breathing crackled through the speaker. Inside the cabin, Caroline broke down, sobbing. Gregory turned pale. Linda's hands shook as she realized her career was collapsing second by second. Jasmine swung the camera toward herself, whispering, "Everyone, this is the biggest twist I've ever seen. He's the largest investor in the airline." The viewer count shot to 12,000, then 15,000. Derek rose, facing the two officers. "What will you put in your report? That a black passenger was disruptive? Or that an investor holding nearly 12% of the company was publicly humiliated?" Daniel swallowed hard, stammering. We will only record the truth." "Exactly," Derek said with a nod. "And the truth is this. Sky High Airlines just shot itself in the foot." He put away his phone, his voice dropping low but resonating like a verdict. This moment will cost this company far more than a single flight. It could cost them their future. The cabin was suffocating with tension. Everyone understood. A storm was coming, one that was not just financial, but moral. The sound of Robert Hale's breathing crackled through the speaker, ragged and uneven, like a man who had just run a long distance. "Mr. Washington, we are fully aware of the severity. Please allow us the chance to make this right." Inside the cabin, no one dared to move. The drone of the engines outside the window felt like background music for an impromptu courtroom. Derek stood tall, no gavel in his hand, yet every word carried the weight of a ruling. He closed the file, set it neatly into his briefcase, then spoke, his voice measured, each word delivered like an executive order. "You want to make it right? Fine. But I am not talking about a personal apology. I am talking about systemic change. If Sky High wants to survive past today, you will listen carefully." On the other end, Robert said nothing, though the furious sound of typing made it clear the entire board of directors was listening. Derek lifted his hand, counting on his fingers. "First, every crew member involved in this incident will be terminated immediately. Not suspended, not disciplined internally." Termination. Caroline broke down, sobbing. "Please, I have 3 children." Derek turned toward her, his gaze like ice. "You should have thought of them when you turned discrimination into habit. Children need a role model who respects human dignity, not someone who hides behind so-called standard procedure to justify prejudice." The typing on the other end ceased. Robert's voice came faintly. "We accept." Derek continued, his tone as steady as a clock. "Second, every single customer, facing employee, from ticket counters to flight attendants, must undergo bias awareness training, and not some token online module, but direct intensive courses taught by civil rights experts." Cold sweat gathered on Linda's skin. She understood the cost would be massive, but she also knew resistance meant suicide. "Third, from now on, every customer interaction must be monitored with body cameras, all data stored on secure cloud servers, overseen independently by a third party." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. Gregory grimaced. "You want to turn this airline into the police?" Derek glanced at him, a faint smile flashing. "No, I want to turn it into a responsible company. Do you know the average cost of a discrimination lawsuit, Gregory? $2.3 million. And the cost of implementing a company-wide body cam system? Less than 1/10 of that. This is basic economics." Jasmine whispered into her phone, eyes shining. He just turned civil rights into a financial equation. The live stream erupted. "This man is brilliant. Teach this in MBA schools." Derek lowered another finger. "Fourth, mandatory monthly diversity audits. Reports published publicly, unedited and uncensored. If Sky High continues to avoid transparency, I will liquidate every share I own and state the reason clearly. Institutional racism." Robert inhaled sharply through the line, his voice trembling. "Mr. Washington, these demands will completely reshape our operations." "Precisely," Derek replied, his words sharp as a blade. He raised his final finger, sealing his ultimatum. "Fifth, any discrimination complaint from a passenger must reach the executive level within 24 hours. No more being blocked at middle management. If issues repeat, the entire board of directors will be held accountable before shareholders and before the public. The silence cracked the air. From seat 3A, the elderly woman's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered, "This is no longer a passenger resisting. This is a leader rewriting the rules." Robert Hale's voice on the other end quivered. "How long? How long do you want for all of this?" Derek answered instantly, his tone not raised but sharp as steel. 90 days, no more. If not, Washington Equity Partners will withdraw its entire investment and will make the reason public. Gregory let out a short, desperate laugh. "You can't do this. A major airline can't overhaul its entire system in 3 months. Derek turned to him, his eyes glinting with cold contempt. "Gregory, you've had years to fix this. Giving you 90 days is generous." Daniel's radio crackled urgently. "Gate 17, we have received direct orders from the board of directors, instructing all crew members to remain in position. Await replacement." Caroline collapsed into her seat, as though she had just been sentenced. Linda looked at her colleague, then at Derek, knowing this moment would be studied in business schools for decades. Derek closed his briefcase, his voice rising with the finality of a tolling bell. "This was never about a seat. This is about dignity. And in business, when you lose dignity, you lose everything." The cabin held its breath. But outside, the digital world was already on fire. The hashtag #SkyHigh accountability was climbing straight to the top of the trending charts. The crackle of the intercom filled the cabin. "Attention crew, this is Captain Reynolds. By direct order of the board of directors, the entire first-class cabin will be temporarily reserved for an emergency session with the executive team." The cabin erupted in shock. Passengers stared at one another, unable to believe what they had just heard. A commercial flight had just been turned into a corporate war room. Derek slowly folded the Wall Street Journal and set it atop his leather briefcase. He did not stand, nor did he gesture. He simply sat in seat 1A, yet every eye was fixed on him, as though he had claimed the entire stage without moving an inch. The satellite phone connected through the cabin speakers. A sharp, commanding female voice rang out. "Mr. Washington, this is Jennifer Liu, Chief Operating Officer. I, along with the entire C-suite, am on the line. We have legal, financial, and PR counsel present. Please state your formal demands." The air grew thick. Gregory, who moments earlier imagined himself the center of attention, now shrank like a shadow in his seat. Caroline kept her head down, mascara streaking with tears. Linda's breaths came fast, knowing every word she had ever spoken had become evidence against her. Derek adjusted the microphone at his seat, his voice deep and resonant, like the toll of a bell. "Jennifer, the demands have been stated. 5 conditions, 90 days. No negotiation." Silence lingered on the other end, followed by frantic typing and hurried whispers. At last, CFO David Morrison spoke. "Mr. Washington, those reforms, the cost is staggering. Body cams, audits, in-person training, we estimate at least $18 million in initial expenses. At current margins, that will push us deep into the red." Derek's lips curved slightly. He pulled from his briefcase a printed spreadsheet and raised it for Jasmine's camera to capture. Bold numbers and sharp graphs sliced across the page. David, last year, Sky High spent $23.7 million on discrimination lawsuits. On average, $28,000 per case. And today, this single incident carries potential legal exposure of more than $2 million. You call that saving money? I call that capital bleeding out. The live stream exploded. He's schooling the CFO live. Numbers don't lie. This is history. Jennifer cut in, her voice straining for composure. Mr. Washington, we acknowledge the issues, but to implement all of this in 90 days, it is not logistically possible. Derek leaned back, his eyes sharp, the way a lawyer dissects a witness. Jennifer, I have read your internal reports. 847 discrimination complaints in the past year. That is more than 2 per day, on average. This is not a logistics problem. This is a cultural problem. And culture, either it changes or it is erased. A sharp inhale crackled through the line, as if the boardroom on the other side had just been struck by artillery fire. Gregory stammered, How did you get access to internal reports? Derek glanced at him, his voice even yet sharp as a blade. Washington Equity does not pour $487 million into an airline without full due diligence. We know every number, every crack in the foundation. The legal counsel on the line broke in. Mr. Washington, if you intend to turn this into a hostile takeover. No. Derek cut him off, his voice falling like a judge's gavel. I intend to turn this into Sky High's survival. Call it compliance, driven reform, or preventive restructuring. Use any corporate jargon you prefer. But remember this, comply or disappear from the market. Jasmine swung her camera, eyes wide with awe. Everyone, he just turned this airplane cabin into a congressional hearing. The elderly woman in seat 3A whispered to her husband, I've flown for decades, and I have never seen a single passenger bring an entire corporation to its knees like this. Derek glanced at his watch. You have 10 minutes to provide an official answer. If not, tomorrow morning Washington Equity announces a complete divestment, accompanied by a detailed report to the press and federal regulators. On the other end, Robert Hale finally spoke, his voice unsteady but resolute. Mr. Washington, the board of directors of Sky High Airlines accepts all conditions. We will draft the resolution immediately. Do you have any words for a public statement? Derek allowed himself a faint smile. He looked directly into Jasmine's live stream camera, his voice booming, each phrase sharp and deliberate. Remember this. This was never about money. This is about dignity. And in business, dignity is the most profitable asset of all. A roar erupted from the online audience. Viewership surged past 50,000. The hashtag #TerDignity has value shot straight to the top of the trending charts. Inside the cabin, Caroline sank into her seat, knowing her career was finished. Gregory covered his face, trembling. Linda looked at Derek, her eyes reflecting both regret and reverence. And Derek? He sat calmly in seat 1A, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. Just a man holding onto his seat and dismantling an entire culture. 6 weeks after the incident on Flight 892, the Seattle headquarters of Sky High Airlines blazed like a furnace. On the 32nd floor, the boardroom that once glittered with profit reports had now transformed into a war room for reform. Dr. Alicia Monroe, a sociologist newly appointed as Chief Diversity Officer, a position that had never existed in the company's history, stood before a large screen, her voice clear and firm. Body cameras have been deployed at 94% of hub airports. In 6 weeks, not a single discrimination complaint has been filed. 0. This number is unprecedented. Robert Hale sat at the head of the table, his hair noticeably grayer after the shock of recent events. He nodded like a man who had narrowly escaped a death sentence. Beside him, Jennifer Liu scribbled furiously, knowing every report from now on could become either a weapon or a shield. Alicia changed the slide. Bias awareness training, 100% completion among all frontline employees. Evaluation results show 78% admitted to having implicit bias. More than half reported a changed perspective after the program. On the live stream screen from Chicago, Derek sat in the office of Washington Equity Partners, wearing a charcoal gray suit with a navy tie. He didn't need to pound the table or raise his voice. His mere presence on the screen was enough to silence the entire room. He leaned toward the camera. "Dr. Monroe, tell me about customer metrics." Maria Santos, the director of customer experience, the same woman who had bravely stood against injustice in the cabin that day, rose to her feet. Her eyes shone with newfound confidence. Customer satisfaction is up 47%. We are now at 4.3 out of 5 stars, far above the 2.4 we had after the incident. Bookings from minority communities have increased 89%. Word of mouth marketing has generated the $67 million in additional revenue. Derek nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips like a green check mark on a balance sheet. Good. You are learning the simple lesson. Respect pays. 1 year later, Harvard Business School incorporated the case into its curriculum under the title The Washington Protocol. The opening slide of the lecture featured an image of Derek seated in 1A, facing the flight attendant's pointed finger. Beneath the picture, the caption read, "Power isn't granted. Power is recognized when used with purpose." Sky High Airlines had become a symbol of reform. Customer satisfaction soared to 4.7 out of 5. Revenue grew 23% compared to pre-incident levels. Costs from discrimination lawsuits down 89%. Stephanie, now known only as former flight attendant, became a speaker at diversity conferences. On stage, her voice trembled, but carried honesty. "I used to believe I was just following procedure, but I didn't see that the procedure itself was built on prejudice. Mr. Washington could have destroyed my life completely. Instead, he chose to turn my shame into a lesson for thousands of others. I take responsibility, and I have changed." The audience rose in applause. Some wept. Richard, the businessman who had once demanded platinum priority, was far quieter. His company lost a $20 million contract. Clients severed ties after the viral video. 6 months later, he was forced to issue a public apology. His letter included the line, "I have learned that the seat does not define the person who sits in it, but how I behave defines me." In Washington, D.C., Congress passed the Dignity and Commerce Act, a federal law requiring all interstate service businesses to implement anti-discrimination training and transparent reporting systems. The name Washington no longer referred only to one CEO, but had become the mark of a movement. On the TED stage, Derek stood beneath the lights, his voice commanding the hall. Power does not lie in the highest seat, but in ensuring that anyone can remain in the seat they paid for. Change does not begin in boardrooms, but in the moment we dare to say no to injustice. And remember this, in the 21st century, discrimination is not only immoral, it is a massive financial liability. Thousands rose to their feet in applause. In that moment, Derek's story was no longer just an incident on a flight. It had become a legacy, spreading across aviation, hospitality, retail, and healthcare. The Washington Protocol had become the new standard, proof that fairness is not only a moral imperative, it is profitable. 18 months after Flight 892, the impact of what had come to be called the Washington Protocol had far surpassed every prediction. In New York, at a hotel industry conference packed with reporters, a massive LED screen replayed the video that once shook the world. Derek, seated in 1A, lifting his head to meet the flight attendant's pointed finger, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of a verdict. Show me that policy in writing. Thousands of arms raised phones to capture the moment once more. Now, that phrase had become a lethal catchphrase in business, something any customer could use when confronted with injustice. The CEO of a major hotel group stood and declared, "We implemented the Washington Protocol across our entire system. The results? Customer satisfaction is up 39%. Litigation costs have been zero in the past 12 months. And revenue from African American customers nearly doubled." The hall erupted in applause. The press named it the dignity dividend. In Los Angeles, a massive retail chain signed a direct consulting deal with Washington Equity, paying tens of millions just to replicate its transparent audit model and camera oversight system. The media asked, "Why such an expensive move?" The CEO replied simply, "Because one live stream of injustice can wipe billions off a company's market value. Prevention is always cheaper than compensation." In the U.S. Congress, the Dignity and Commerce Act, legislation inspired by Derek's case, was expanded. All interstate businesses in public services were now required to 1. Complete annual anti-bias training. 2. Publicly report all complaints related to discrimination. 3. Establish direct channels for customers to escalate issues to senior leadership. A senator declared in session, "What happened on Flight 892 proves that fairness is not only moral, it is the foundation of economic operation. We cannot allow an airline, a restaurant, or a bank to keep profiting from the silence of the offended." The law passed with rare bipartisan support, a rarity in a polarized political climate. On social media, the hashtag #DignityHasValue had grown into a movement. Every month, thousands of videos appeared. Hotels, restaurants, retail stores, even hospitals, places where ordinary people openly recorded scenes of injustice. Some clips gained millions of views within hours, forcing businesses to apologize and change policies within 24 hours. CNN called it the Derek Washington effect. Forbes put his face on the cover with the headline, "The Man Who Turned Respect into Economic Capital." It was not just in the US. In Europe, Lufthansa announced the rollout of the Washington Protocol. In Japan, the nation's largest hotel group declared the creation of a scholarship fund for minority employees, inspired by Washington Capital. In South Africa, a mining company implemented a direct reporting discrimination system for its entire workforce underground. From a single airplane cabin, the wave had spread worldwide. And in Chicago, in his office overlooking Lake Michigan, Derek sat quietly writing the annual report for investors. On the desk, next to his laptop, lay the old printed boarding pass that still read, Seat 1A. He kept it not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a token of the power of timely resistance. He paused his pen, gazing at the sunset. His voice, this time not in a cabin, not on a live stream, but within his own mind, echoed, "Power is not shouting louder than others. Power is making them fall silent, so they can hear the truth." The door opened. His assistant entered. "Sir, the United Nations would like to invite you to speak at a special session on global fairness in service commerce." Derek nodded slightly. He knew the story had grown far beyond him. It was no longer an incident, but a chapter in history. 18 months after Flight 892, Seat 1A in Sky High Airline's first-class cabin was often left empty. Not because no one could afford it, but because the company had turned it into a symbol. A small plaque was fixed to the seat, engraved with the words, "Seat 1A, the birthplace of the Washington Protocol. Respect is our core value." Passengers frequently stopped to take photos, sharing them on social media with the hashtag "Dignity has value." The seat had become a living memorial to the moment when one man, once dismissed, reshaped an entire industry. Linda, the former flight attendant who had demanded Derek vacate his seat, now lived a very different life. After being terminated, she fell into depression, but later enrolled in behavioral psychology courses, earned her certification, and now works for a non-profit supporting victims of discrimination. In an interview, she admitted, "I was wrong, but that mistake taught me that the power of a smile can either build or destroy a person. I chose to rebuild." Gregory, the businessman who once demanded platinum priority, endured a brutal downfall. His company lost multi-million-dollar contracts. His reputation collapsed. Yet the fall forced him to confront himself. 6 months later, he wrote a memoir titled The Seat I Didn't Deserve, which became a bestseller. In it, he recounted his arrogance and the lesson of being condemned by the very community he once overlooked. Caroline, the young flight attendant who initially followed her colleague's lead, became another example of redemption. After her suspension, she joined a scholarship program funded by Washington Capital. Today, she is a law student specializing in civil rights. At a conference, she said, "Once, I pointed my finger and tried to force a man from his rightful seat. Now, I want to use these hands to defend those who have been forced out of their place in society." As for Sky High Airlines, the incident had rewritten its corporate history. Its annual report began with a pledge. "We once failed, but by facing the truth, we were reborn." Respect is not a slogan, it is an asset. Market figures proved the promise. Sky High's stock not only recovered, but rose 23% above pre-crisis levels. Analysts called it the Washington miracle. As for Derek, he avoided the spotlight as much as possible. When forced to appear, he often dressed modestly, refusing to turn himself into a celebrity. But in key moments, such as when addressing the United Nations, he could silence an entire chamber. That day, I only wanted to read my newspaper and wait for the flight to depart. But when I was treated as an imposter in the very seat I had paid for, I understood. Silence is consent. I did not stand up so I could win. I stood up so the system would have to change. And remember, fairness is not a favor. It is the basic condition for any economy to exist. Thousands rose to their feet, the applause thundering like a storm. A year later, Seat 1A was no longer just a memory. It had become the opening chapter of the fair economy movement, spreading into hotels, banks, hospitals, and even technology. Corporations proudly showcased their adoption of the Washington Protocol as a badge of honor. On social media, millions who had once suffered injustice used their phones to record and to challenge. Show me that policy in writing. Each video, each post, became a piece of a larger mosaic of change. Derek often rejected being called a hero. When asked, he simply replied, "I never sought that role. I only sat quietly in the seat I had paid for." But if a small act can make millions reconsider how they treat one another, then perhaps that was the most valuable seat on earth. The spotlight now shone on the iconic photo of him leaning back in Seat 1A, displayed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History. The image captured not just a man, but a moment that redefined the power of dignity. When night fell over Chicago, Derek stepped out of his office, gazing at the city lights shimmering on Lake Michigan. He recalled the words he had once spoken. Dignity is the most sustainable asset. Now it was no longer a reminder for a single airline. It had become a truth the entire world was forced to learn by heart. In the world of business, people often speak about profit, market share, or competitive advantage. But Derek's story revealed that true power lies in dignity. A single seat, seemingly insignificant, can become a moral test for the entire airline industry, and beyond that, for society as a whole. When a passenger was demeaned because of his skin color, he transformed humiliation into a catalyst that reformed a multi-billion-dollar system. It was undeniable proof that fairness is not only right in principle, it is also the most profitable investment. If you believe that respect must come before profit, then, like this video, subscribe to see more dignity check stories and comment below with the phrase, "Respect first." Because change does not always begin in a lavish boardroom. Sometimes it begins with nothing more than a seat, and one person brave enough to say, "No."